Matt Weston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak to new clause 1, 11 and 12. And I really want to speak very much in support of a customs union. I have to say just how surprised I was to hear the former minister and now member, or the member for Halton, Price and Howden, in the way he was describing the border at Detroit and Ontario, which I was lucky enough to go to back in February with fellow members of the International Trade Select Committee. And I think I witnessed something slightly different to what he did. And that was, I did see friction, even on a very cold, icy day. There was considerable time spent there at the border, and they do have an X-ray building for pantechnicons, and they do take vehicles out of the queues to examine on a very frequent basis. It is not as simple as I think he was suggesting. And added to that, perhaps just to underline, and perhaps he was not so aware, is that Canada is having to invest in a second bridge across the river between Ontario and Detroit to safeguard their business because of the delays that they're actually suffering. So I would agree with the member for Rushcliffe, for whom I have a huge amount of respect. And when he was describing the great fear, really, of what we're facing here, in what seems to be an apparent pursuit of ideological goals, or indeed personal ambition on the part of certain individuals. Importantly, and I would say that for many months now, almost a year, I have been trying to encourage businesses, the likes of Jaguar Land Rover in my constituency and others, to speak out. Yep. And businesses are terrified of doing that. They are terrified because they fear incurring the wrath of the public. They do not see it as their responsibility. They see it as at the part of ourselves as elected representatives to do that. But they have felt necessary in recent weeks. And of course we've heard from Airbus, we've heard from Jaguar Land Rover, and when they speak softly, but we should be listening, and the public should be listening, because they speak so rarely, and that is why it is so important. It is far more critical that we listen to the likes of Jaguar Land Rover or BMW Mini than, dare I say, the member for Uxbridge. And I think the public are beginning to see that, and I think the public now are recognising that amongst all the debate that goes on in here, there is beginning to become some clarity coming from those voices. For over 2 years, businesses have waited for the government to give some sort of direction against this uncertainty that they face. And I think it's that, really, that is the threat for them. I was interested to hear the points being made by the Honourable Member for Harwich and North Essex, and I respect him and indeed his experience. But I think it's the disruption and uncertainty that is of greatest concern to businesses. And they will review their options, and they have been for the last 24 months. And irrespective of where we end up in the coming weeks, they are already making their decisions. They are already taking options abroad for future investment. Anything that makes life difficult for business, which adds cost, which adds time, makes them review those proposals and those options and what is in their best interest. And looking at the automotive industry and many others, the businesses are not so obviously viable to incur the costs of WTO additional tariffs. They will review that 10%, that 4.5%, and cost it in and think, is it really best for us to stay in the UK?
Would my honourable friend give way?
I will indeed.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and he speaks with great experience on these matters. Would he agree with me that the costs he's just talking about tariffs, rules of origin, which we've discussed earlier, customs declarations, may for small businesses be a cost that they cannot accommodate, and maybe more than the profit they're making on the goods that they're selling at the moment. So it is the small and medium-sized enterprises that would be most adversely affected by the argument made by some opposite that we should contemplate no deal with equanimity.
I thank my honourable friend, and he is quite right, that for SMEs, particularly in the component supply chain, that they are the most vulnerable to these sorts of changes, and they are the ones that will see the likelihood of either losing business elsewhere or having to move abroad as necessary. And I can give absolute examples of where that has already taken place. The honourable member and learned member for Rushcliffe, when he was describing the customs union, is apparently some sort of problem to us, that somehow it's holding us back. Of course, he's quite right. It has not been. When you look at the likes of Germany, who have 10 times our exports to China, they're in the customs union. It's not been to their disadvantage. And as he said, over the last 10 years, we have witnessed the most phenomenal explosion and success of the automotive industry in this country, where it has grown by over 50% in that period after 20 years of relative stagnation. And I would just say, in summing up, that when it is rare for businesses to speak out, we should really listen. They do not intervene lightly in the politics of this country or elsewhere. So for me, the preservation of a true customs union is critical to safeguard business and future investment in this country. And that is why I'll be supporting the new clauses 1, 11 and 12.
Thank you.